Lauren Barrett adjusted her glasses and carefully checked the last line of the quarterly report. At 60, she still worked with the same meticulousness as she had 30 years ago when she first stepped into the consulting firm Prime Advisors in downtown Portland. Numbers never lied, unlike people, and Lauren found particular comfort in their accuracy. Each line of the balance sheet told a story. Each column was part of the big picture of the company's financial well-being. Outside the 7th-floor window, a typical Oregon drizzle enveloped the city in a gray haze. Raindrops ran down the glass, blurring the outlines of buildings and turning the world into a watercolor painting in shades of gray. The company's office was located in a modern glass and concrete building, but inside, there was an almost family atmosphere. Colleagues had known each other for years, remembered birthdays and family problems, shared lunches and weekend plans. The people who worked here had been through the ups and downs of the business together, celebrated successes, and supported each other in difficult times. Lauren loved these last hours of the workday, when the office gradually emptied and she could finish her work in peace without the hustle and bustle and distracting conversations. At these moments, she often thought about the years she had lived, about how the company had changed since she had arrived here as a young woman of 30. Back then, there were only 12 people in the office, and now the company had over 80 employees. "Lauren, you're staying late again," a familiar voice said behind her. She turned and saw Ronald Clark standing next to her desk, holding 2 cups of coffee. Ronald was 58, and over the past 5 years he had become her closest friend in the office, and perhaps outside of it as well. They had never openly discussed their feelings, but the warmth of their relationship was obvious to all their colleagues. They had lunch together, discussed work issues, and shared stories about their children and grandchildren, although Lauren herself did not have any children. "I just want to finish this report by tomorrow," Lauren replied, taking the cup. The coffee was hot and aromatic, just the way she liked it. "You know how I hate putting things off." Ronald smiled and sat down on the edge of the neighboring table. He was a tall man with a graying beard and kind brown eyes. He worked as a financial analyst and was known for his calm demeanor. His colleagues often turned to him for advice, knowing that he would always listen and help them find a solution. Over the years, a special relationship had developed between him and Lauren, not love in the traditional sense, but a deep affection and mutual understanding. "You're almost there and you're still worrying about every comma," he said gently. 3 weeks, Lauren. Then you can finally relax." 3 weeks and 4 days, she clarified with a smile. "But who's counting?" Ronald laughed, but Lauren saw the sadness in his eyes. He understood that with her departure, he would lose not just a colleague, but the closest person in his life. He had an adult daughter who lived in another state, and the occasional phone calls with her could not replace his daily interactions with Lauren. Lauren nodded. But deep down, she felt uneasy. 30 years at the same company was a lifetime, and the thought of leaving it all behind soon was frightening. Her job not only provided her with a livelihood, but also a sense of purpose and stability. Here she was, a master of her craft, an expert whose opinion was valued. What would happen next? Empty days, slow hours, a lack of purpose and meaning? "Maybe we could meet up sometimes," Ronald suggested cautiously. "I mean, after you retire. Have dinner somewhere? Go to the movies?" Lauren felt her heart skip a beat. There was more to it than just friendly get-togethers, and she knew it. "Sure, Ron," she replied warmly. "I'd love to." He smiled, and his face lit up. At that moment, Lauren realized that there really was something special between them, something that went beyond a working relationship. At 7 o'clock in the evening, Lauren finally gathered her things and headed for the exit. Ronald walked her to the elevator, as he had done every day for several months. It had become their little ritual, a few minutes alone at the end of the workday. "See you tomorrow," he said, lightly touching her hand. "See you, Ron." The drive home usually took 20 minutes, but today Lauren was in no hurry. She loved Portland in the evening, when the lights came on in the houses and the streets filled with people rushing about their business. The city lived its measured life, and Lauren felt like she was part of this large organism. Lauren's house was located in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Portland, a 20-minute drive from the office. It was a small, one-story house with white walls and a green roof, surrounded by a neat garden. Jerome kept the property in perfect condition on his own, mowing the lawn, tending to the rose bushes their late mother had planted, and repairing anything that needed attention. Lauren had lived there with her older brother Jerome for over 10 years, ever since he retired from the railroad. Their life together began after the death of their parents. Jerome had been widowed a few years earlier, and Lauren had never married, devoting herself to her career. When it became clear that maintaining 2 homes was too expensive, the decision was easy. They got along well, respected each other's personal space, and found comfort in their family closeness. Jerome met her at the doorstep, a tall man of 65 with a strong build and the calloused hands of a mechanic. Despite his age, he still looked strong and reliable. His gray hair was neatly trimmed, and his dark eyes showed the same kindness as when she was a child. He was 5 years older than Lauren, and had always treated her with special care, especially after their parents died. "How's work, sis?" he asked, helping her take off her coat. "Everything's fine," Lauren replied. But Jerome, who had known her since childhood, detected a note of concern in her voice. He hung her coat in the closet and looked at his sister intently. Over the long years they had known each other, he had learned to read her mood by the slightest change in her expression, her gait, the way she held her shoulders. "Is something wrong?" Lauren went into the kitchen and put the kettle on. The kitchen was their favorite place to talk, cozy, with a wooden table where they had breakfast and dinner, discussing the events of the day. On the windowsill were pots of herbs that Jerome had grown, and on the walls hung family photos from different years. Jerome waited patiently, knowing she would tell him when she was ready. He took the ingredients for dinner out of the refrigerator and began cooking, not rushing his sister for an answer. "There are rumors that the company may be sold," she said finally, taking cups out of the cupboard. "Old Riley has been in negotiations for several months." Jerome frowned. Frank Riley was the founder and owner of Prime Advisors, an old-school guy who treated his employees like family. Lauren often talked about how he congratulated everyone on holidays, took an interest in their personal problems, and helped them out when they were in a bind. Under him, no one was ever fired without good reason, and people worked for decades. "Is that a bad thing?" "I don't know," Lauren admitted, pouring tea into cups. "I only have 3 weeks left before retirement. If the new owners start laying people off—" "Don't get yourself worked up," Jerome reassured her, putting his arm around her shoulders. "No one's going to fire you 3 weeks before retirement. That would be inhumane." But his words proved prophetic in the darkest sense. The following days passed in an atmosphere of growing anxiety. Rumors spread throughout the office that negotiations were indeed underway, and that a deal could be finalized in the near future. Employees whispered in the hallways, discussing possible changes and making plans in case of layoffs. Lauren tried to stay calm and focus on her work, but she couldn't shake her anxiety. Every day, she marked her calendar with relief. Another day closer to retirement, another step toward security. A week later, the rumors were confirmed. Frank Riley gathered all the employees in the large conference room on the 9th floor. It was a spacious room with panoramic windows overlooking the entire city of Portland. It was usually used for special events such as New Year's celebrations, employee awards, and presentations of major projects. Riley looked tired and aged. He was 72 years old, and the last few months had clearly been difficult for him. His gray hair was thinning, and his eyes showed the sadness of a man who had made a difficult decision. "My dear friends," he began, and the room fell silent. "Today I have some important news to share with you. After much thought, I have decided to sell the company." A murmur ran through the room. Many employees had been expecting this, but the official confirmation still had the effect of a bombshell. "The buyer is Mr. Adam Pennington, a successful entrepreneur from California," Riley continued. "He already owns several consulting firms and has extensive experience in our field." Lauren glanced at Ronald, who was sitting next to her. She saw the same concern in his eyes that she felt herself. "Mr. Pennington is a young and ambitious leader," Riley said, but there was uncertainty in his voice. "I am confident that under his leadership, the company will reach new heights." Something about the old boss's tone alarmed her. Lauren knew Riley well enough to understand that he wasn't entirely sure he had made the right decision. Perhaps he had been forced into it by circumstances, perhaps by financial problems that the rank and file were unaware of. After the announcement, Riley tried to answer questions, but his answers were evasive. He talked about new opportunities, business development, and job security, but it all sounded unconvincing. "What will happen to our employment contracts?" someone in the audience asked. "The new management will decide this on an individual basis," Riley replied. "But I hope that most of you will stay with the company." After the meeting, the employees lingered for a long time, discussing what they had heard. Some expressed optimism, talking about opportunities for growth and development. Others were more skeptical, recalling instances when a change of ownership had led to mass layoffs. "What do you think?" Ronald asked when they were alone. "I don't know," Lauren admitted. "I only have 2.5 weeks left. Can something bad really happen in such a short time?" "Of course not," Ronald reassured her, but she detected a hint of doubt in his voice. Adam Pennington showed up at the office the day after the papers were signed. He was a tall, athletic man dressed in an expensive suit from a well-known designer. His dark skin glowed with health and well-groomed, his white-toothed smile was perfect, and his dark eyes revealed a cold calculation. Everything about him spoke of success and self-confidence, from the expensive watch on his wrist to his Italian shoes. He was accompanied by a young woman, tall, slender, with a perfect figure, and a face that could grace the cover of a fashion magazine. Her outfit probably cost more than the average employee's monthly salary. Her long hair was styled in an elaborate hairdo, her makeup was flawless, and her movements were polished to perfection. "Meet Kayla Reeves, my new deputy," Pennington announced to the assembled employees in the same conference room. Kayla was no more than 28, and it was obvious that she had not been appointed to such a responsible position because of her work experience or professional achievements. She carried herself with provocative confidence, surveying the office with a look of superiority. Her posture and facial expression conveyed contempt for those around her, as if everyone present were second-class citizens. "Kayla will be overseeing financial planning and human resources," Pennington continued. "She has extensive experience in corporate management." Lauren exchanged glances with her colleagues. Everyone understood what was happening, but no one dared to express their thoughts aloud. The new boss had brought his mistress with him and appointed her to a key position, despite her lack of qualifications. The first changes were not long in coming. By the end of the first week, Pennington had fired 3 middle managers, including the head of the finance department, under whom Lauren worked. All 3 were experienced professionals with impeccable reputations, but their crime was that they dared to ask uncomfortable questions about the new management's plans. Pennington replaced them with his own people, young professionals who had come with him from California. These people kept to themselves, made no attempt to fit in, and treated the rest of the staff with ill-concealed contempt. The atmosphere in the office changed dramatically and almost instantly. The warm conversations over coffee, friendly banter, and mutual support that made the workdays pleasant disappeared. Now people whispered, looked around warily, afraid to say the wrong thing. The new managers kept their distance, constantly discussing things among themselves and closely watching the work of the old employees, as if looking for reasons to criticize them. It was especially hard on older employees. Pennington made no secret of his contempt for those over 50. He openly criticized their work methods, questioned their competence, and hinted that it was time to think about changing careers. His favorite phrase was, "There is no place for outdated approaches in today's world. You're stuck in the past," he said once, addressing a group of employees during a morning meeting. "The world has changed. Technology is advancing, and you're still working the old way. Customers want innovation, not methods that are 20 years old." These words were like a slap in the face to people who had been doing their jobs honestly for decades and were proud of their professionalism. Ronald clenched his fists, but said nothing. Lauren saw his shoulders tense, his eyes narrow, and his knuckles turn white. After the meeting, they went out onto the balcony, even though neither of them smoked. "What a jerk," Ronald whispered, making sure no one was around. "He thinks that just because he has money, he can treat people like dirt." "Let's just bear with it," Lauren replied, though she was struggling to hold back tears. "I only have 2 weeks left. And I have 7 years until retirement," Ronald said with a bitter smile. I don't know how I'll survive. But the trials were just beginning. Kayla Reeves turned out to be even worse than her boyfriend. With no experience in consulting, she constantly interfered in processes she didn't understand, criticized time-tested methods, and demanded detailed reports on every little thing. Her ignorance would have been funny if it hadn't caused so much inconvenience. She would demand that a report be redone because she didn't like the font, or she would launch into a tirade about office supply expenses. The administrative staff, secretaries, and assistants got the worst of it, as she openly treated them like servants. The incident that became a turning point occurred on Tuesday of the second week after the new management arrived. Lauren had exactly 10 days left until retirement, and she had already begun counting down the hours in her mind. She was working on a complex financial analysis for a major client, a construction company that was planning to expand its business. The project was important and lucrative, and Lauren was putting all her expertise into it. Kayla approached her desk around 3 o'clock in the afternoon when the office was full of people. She moved with an air of importance, like a queen surveying her domain. "What are those numbers?" she asked sharply, pointing her manicured finger at the monitor. "Equipment depreciation calculations for the Henderson project," Lauren replied as politely as she could, though she was already boiling inside. "Why are you using this method?" Kayla leaned over the desk, exuding expensive perfume. Wouldn't it be more logical to use straight-line depreciation? Lauren felt her heart sink. The question revealed a complete lack of understanding of the basics of financial planning. Straight-line depreciation would have been a huge mistake in this case, but explaining that to someone who should have known better was humiliating. For this type of equipment, accelerated depreciation is more advantageous from a tax perspective, Lauren explained patiently. It allows the client to save significantly in the first few years of operation. "I disagree," Kayla snapped. "Your methods are outdated. Redo the calculations." "But that's not right," Lauren tried to argue. "I checked everything against the regulations. I'm not interested in your regulatory documents." Kayla interrupted her in a raised voice. "I said redo it, so redo it." The argument attracted the attention of other employees. People looked up from their computers and listened to the conversation. The atmosphere in the office became tense, everyone sensing that a conflict was brewing. Soon they were joined by Pennington, who had heard the raised voices from his office. He appeared with an annoyed expression on his face, as if he had been torn away from something very important. "What's the problem?" he asked, coldly, glancing around at the gathered crowd. "Mrs. Barrett refuses to correct a mistake in the calculations," Kyle complained with an air of offended innocence. "I explained the correct method to her, but she insists on doing it her way." "There's no mistake," Lauren tried to argue, feeling her voice tremble with tension. "I've been working with these methods for 30 years, and they are completely in line with—" "Exactly," Pennington interrupted with an icy smile. 30 years of the same thing. Maybe it's time to learn something new? Or do you think the world hasn't changed in all that time?" Lauren felt her cheeks flush with shame and anger. Almost all of her colleagues had gathered around, watching the humiliating scene. Among the onlookers, she saw Ronald, his face pale with rage, his fists clenched. "I'm doing everything right," she said quietly but firmly, summoning the last of her dignity. "Right?" Kayla laughed a ringing, mocking laugh. "Sweetheart, you're stuck in the last century. Maybe it really is time for you to retire?" The words sounded like a slap in the face. The office became so quiet that all you could hear was the hum of the air conditioner. Everyone knew something was wrong, but no one dared to intervene. "Kayla's right," Pennington agreed, his voice tinged with cold satisfaction. "Mrs. Barrett, if you can't adapt to the new requirements and working methods, perhaps you should reconsider the terms of your employment contract." The threat was delivered calmly, almost indifferently, but everyone understood that it was a threat. Lauren turned pale and involuntarily grabbed the edge of the table. She had 10 days left until retirement. Just 10 days, and now even that seemed like an unattainable dream. I understand," she said barely audibly. "Excellent," Pennington smiled, and that smile was worse than any threat. "Then redo the calculations by tomorrow, and next time you're given instructions, follow them without question." He turned and walked to his office. while Kayla lingered for a moment, savoring her victory. "I hope we understand each other now," she said to Lauren with a fake smile. The other employees slowly dispersed to their desks, casting sympathetic glances at Lauren. After the incident with the calculations, life in the office became even more tense. Adam Pennington seemed to have tasted power and began to show his cruelty more openly. Every day brought new humiliations for the employees, especially those over 50. Lauren redid the calculations as Kyle had demanded, even though she knew the new version contained serious errors. When the client returned the project with comments, Pennington held a debriefing, accusing Lauren of incompetence. The fact that the errors were the result of his instructions did not interest him. "See what happens when people don't want to learn new things," he said, addressing the younger employees. "The client is unhappy, and the company's reputation suffers, all because of stubbornness and unwillingness to accept modern working methods." Lauren sat at her desk, feeling her cheeks burn with shame. Ronald tried several times to defend her, but Pennington quickly put him in his place. "Mr. Clark, perhaps you should spend more time on your own work instead of defending your colleagues from fair criticism." The atmosphere in the office was becoming increasingly tense. Seeing how the new management treated their senior colleagues, the young employees began to shun Lauren and Ronald. Some even openly demonstrated their loyalty to the new boss by reporting every dissatisfied sigh or negative comment to him. Pennington introduced new rules that hit older employees particularly hard. Now everyone had to come to work half an hour early for morning motivational meetings, and staying late after the end of the workday became practically mandatory. Any tardiness was punished with a fine, and any early departure was reprimanded. "We are building a new corporate culture," Pennington explained. "A culture of dedication, a culture of results. If someone isn't ready for change, they can look for work elsewhere." Meanwhile, Kayla enjoyed her power. She came up with new ways to humiliate her subordinates, demanding reports during non-working hours, conducting searches of employees' personal belongings, and interfering in private conversations. She especially liked to mock older women. "Darling," she would say to Lauren with feigned concern, "maybe you should update your wardrobe? An employee's appearance reflects on the company's image." Or, "Lauren, sweetie, you look tired. Maybe the job has become too hard for you?" Each remark was like a stab in the back. Lauren knew they were trying to get her fired, but she didn't know how to defend herself. She had only 8 days left until retirement, and she clung to that thought like a lifeline. The turning point came on Thursday morning. Pennington called all the employees into the conference room for an emergency meeting. His face was grim, and his movements sharp. "We have a serious problem," he began without preamble. "Client Henderson has pulled out of the project because of errors in the financial calculations. This is a blow to the company's reputation and a direct financial loss." Lauren felt a chill run down her spine. She knew the mistakes were the result of Kayla's insistence, but she understood that no one was interested in explanations. "I demand an explanation from those responsible," Pennington continued, turning his gaze to Lauren. "Mrs. Barrett, this is your job. How can you explain such blatant incompetence?" Lauren stood up, feeling her knees tremble. The entire office was looking at her, and in some eyes she saw sympathy, in others indifference, and in the eyes of the younger employees even malice. "I did the calculations according to the instructions I received," she said quietly. "Instructions?" Pennington feigned surprise. What instructions could there be when performing professional duties? You are an experienced professional. You should have known how to do the job correctly. But Kayla insisted on using straight-line depreciation. "Don't you dare shift the blame onto others!" Pennington exploded. "That's low and unprofessional." Kayla stood next to him, feigning indignant innocence. "I simply suggested an alternative approach," she said in a sweet voice. "But the final decision always rests with the person carrying out the work. I couldn't have imagined that an experienced accountant wouldn't be able to assess the feasibility of my proposal." Lauren felt the ground slipping away from under her feet. They had set this trap in advance, knowing full well that they would pin all the blame on her. "Mr. Pennington," Ronald stood up, unable to bear what was happening. "Lauren Barrett is one of the most experienced and reliable employees in this company. In 30 years of service, She has never had a single serious complaint. Mr. Clark, Pennington interrupted coldly. No one asked for your opinion. And by the way, since you're so eager to defend your colleague, maybe you were involved in this mistake too? You work in the same department after all. I had nothing to do with Henderson's project, Ronald replied firmly. But you could have checked the work, warned her about the mistake, Kayla interjected. Aren't colleagues supposed to help each other? Pennington nodded, as if he had just heard a brilliant idea. Exactly. Mr. Clark, it appears that you are either incompetent and failed to notice serious errors, or you noticed them but kept quiet. Either way, it shows that you are unfit for your position. That's absurd, Ronald couldn't hold back. You're deliberately looking for a reason to do what? Pennington asked dangerously quietly. Finish your sentence, Mr. Clark. What am I deliberately looking for? Ronald realized he had gone too far, but it was too late. Pennington had gotten what he wanted, an excuse to get rid of him. I see you have nothing to say in your defense, continued the new boss. Then let me speak. I came to this company to take it to the next level. But how can I do that with employees who not only make serious mistakes, but are also incapable of taking responsibility for them? He walked around the room, basking in the attention of his audience. Hi, Mrs. Barrett. Your work on the Henderson project has shown you to be completely unfit for this job. Not only did you let the client down, but you also damaged the company's reputation. And Mr. Clark has demonstrated an inability to work in a team and a lack of respect for management. Lauren felt her heart leap into her throat. She had 5 days left until retirement, just 5 days. Mr. Pennington, she said pleadingly, I only have 5 days left before retirement. I admit my mistake. I'm willing to make it right. Do whatever you say. 5 days? Pennington feigned surprise. Does that make any difference? Does retirement give you the right to be negligent? No, of course not, but… No buts, he cut her off. Professionalism doesn't depend on age or seniority. Either you're capable of doing your job well, or you're not. Kayla moved closer, her eyes flashing with anger. Lauren, dear, she said with feigned pity, you understand that after such a failure, we can't trust you with important work. What if you make another mistake? The company can't take that risk. I'll work for free for the next 5 days, Lauren offered desperately. Just let me finish until I retire. An awkward whisper rippled through the room. Many colleagues looked down at the floor, unable to bear the sight. Ronald clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles turned white. For free? Pennington laughed. You think this is about money? It's about reputation, about the quality of our work. I can't allow incompetent employees to compromise our company. Please, Lauren whispered, and tears finally rolled down her cheeks. I beg you. My decision is final, Pennington announced. Mrs. Barrett, you are fired, effective immediately. Mr. Clark, you are receiving a written warning and will be placed on probation. The slightest violation will result in your dismissal as well. You can't do this, Ronald shouted. This is inhumane. I can do what I think is best for the company, Pennington replied coldly. And I advise you, Mr. Clark, to watch your language if you want to keep your job. Lauren stood in the middle of the room, feeling dozens of eyes on her. Some expressed sympathy, others relief that the trouble had passed them by, and still others indifference. Her world collapsed in a single second. 30 years of honest work, 5 days away from a well-deserved retirement, and all of it wiped out by the decision of a cruel man. Clear your desk by the end of the day, added Kayla with sadistic pleasure. Security will escort you out. Lauren walked silently to her desk. Her colleagues stepped aside, not knowing what to say. Ronald tried to approach her, but a security guard blocked his way. I'm sorry, he whispered from afar. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. Lauren gathered her personal belongings, a few photographs, a mug her colleagues had given her for her birthday, a small cactus on the windowsill. 30 years of her life fit into a small box. The security guard escorted her to the elevator under the curious glances of her colleagues. In the elevator, Lauren finally let her tears flow. When the doors opened on the first floor, she saw through the glass walls of the office that Pennington was upstairs in the conference room, telling the remaining employees something, gesturing and smiling. At home, she was met by a worried Jerome. He was in the garage when he heard the car, and went out to see why his sister had returned so early. "Lauren, what happened?" She told him everything, unable to hold back her sobs. Jerome listened silently, his face growing darker with every word. "Bastards," he whispered finally. "How dare they?" "What am I going to do now, Jerome?" Lauren cried. "My pension will be tiny. I won't even have enough money for medicine. Who's going to hire me at 60? Jerome hugged his sister, feeling rage boiling inside him. He would have loved to go to the office and explain to that insolent man what it meant to hurt defenseless people. But he knew that would only make Lauren's situation worse. "We'll think of something," he said hoarsely. "I have savings, and we have our house. We'll be fine." "But it's not fair," Lauren sobbed. "I've worked hard all my life, never cheated anyone, never hurt anyone. What for?" Jerome didn't know what to say. There was no justice in the world, and good didn't always triumph over evil. Ronald called that evening. His voice was broken and tired. "Lauren, how are you?" "Bad, Ron, really bad. I tried to talk to them after you left, but they wouldn't even listen. They said their decision was final." "How are you? You got hit hard too." "I'm holding on for now, but I know it won't last long. They're just looking for an excuse to get rid of all the old employees." 2 weeks passed. Lauren sat at home trying to find a job, but everywhere she went, she heard the same thing. She was too old, didn't have experience with modern software, and her salary expectations were too high. At 60, she found herself unwanted. Jerome tried to support his sister, but he could see her withering away before his eyes. Depression took hold of her more and more. She hardly ate, slept poorly, and sat for hours at the window, staring into space. The news about Ronald came unexpectedly. He had been fired for systematic violation of labor discipline and disrespect for management. He called Lauren that evening. "It's over," he said wearily. "I was called into Pennington's office today and fired. For what? For standing up for you, for daring to talk back to the big boss." "My God, Ron." "You know what the worst part is? They made a big show of it. They gathered all the employees and publicly announced my dismissal. Kayla read out a list of my offenses: being 3 minutes late 2 weeks ago, allegedly being rude to a customer, which never happened, disobeying management instructions. Lauren listened and felt a fire of rage burning in her chest. They didn't just fire a good man. They publicly humiliated him, trampled on his dignity. And then Pennington said it was a lesson for everyone else. Ronald continued. That anyone who tried to undermine management would get the same treatment. The young employees even applauded, can you believe it? "Ron, I'm so sorry." "I'm 58, Lauren. Who's going to hire me now? I've got 5 years left on my mortgage. My daughter's in college." There was despair in his voice, and Lauren realized that it wasn't just her life that had been ruined. Pennington and Kayla had destroyed people's lives for their own pleasure, reveling in their power. After talking to Ronald, Lauren sat in the dark kitchen for a long time. Jerome had gone to bed and the house was silent. Thoughts of injustice and cruelty swirled in her head, of how easily evil people could destroy the lives of others. 30 years of honest work, and what was the result? Humiliation, a meager pension, and the inability to find a new job. And these two, young, beautiful, rich, continue to enjoy life without bearing any responsibility for the evil they have caused. Rage grew inside her like a tumor. Lauren knew it was wrong, that anger destroys the soul, but she couldn't help herself. Every day brought new humiliations, rejections from employers, condescending smiles from recruiters, the realization that she was useless. And somewhere in the city center, in a warm office, Adam Pennington and Kayla Reeves were making plans for the future, not thinking about those whose lives they had destroyed. And that was the worst part, their complete indifference to other people's pain. A month passed in search of work. Lauren went to every possible place, from large companies to small firms, but everywhere she was politely turned down. Her age worked against her, and she bitterly realized that the world had changed and there was no place for people like her anymore. Depression came in waves. The days dragged on, monotonous and gray. Jerome tried to support his sister, but he could see her fading away before his eyes. He suggested she take up gardening or find a hobby, but Lauren just shook her head. Work wasn't just a source of income. It was her purpose in life, and now that purpose was gone. A call from a small accounting firm called Elements Consulting came to the rescue. The secretary said she was ready to meet with Lauren to discuss the possibility of employment as an accounting consultant. "Lauren!" Jerome exclaimed happily when his sister told him the news. "That's wonderful. I told you that sooner or later you'd find a place where your experience would be appreciated." The interview was scheduled for Monday morning at 10 o'clock. Lauren prepared for it as if it were an exam. She reviewed new laws, studied modern accounting programs, and picked out an outfit. For the first time in a month, her eyes sparkled with hope. "Good luck, sis," Jerome said as he saw her off on Monday morning. "Show them what real professionalism means." Lauren kissed her brother on the cheek and got into the car. She was in high spirits. She even hummed an old song she loved when she was younger. Maybe things would still work out. Maybe a new chapter in her life was waiting for her. It had been raining since morning. Oregon greeted Monday with a heavy downpour that had lasted all night and left huge puddles on the roads. But even that didn't spoil Lauren's mood. She drove along familiar streets and thought about how she would talk about her experience at the interview, how she would convince the employer of her value. The Elements Consulting office was located in the business center, a 20-minute drive from her home. Lauren left early so she wouldn't be late and could calmly prepare for the meeting. She was wearing her best suit, dark blue, conservative, which always made her feel confident. She was only a few blocks away from her destination when something happened that turned her whole life upside down. Lauren stopped at a red light at the intersection of West Burnside and 23rd Avenue. To the right of the road was a large puddle, the result of yesterday's rain and a clogged storm drain. The puddle was deep, almost reaching the sidewalk, and Lauren mentally pitied the pedestrians who would have to walk around it. The light turned green, and she started moving. At that moment, an expensive sports car roared past her, a black BMW with tinted windows. The driver was going very fast, and at the last moment swerved sharply to the side of the road, deliberately driving into the puddle. Dirty water shot up in a huge fountain. Lauren didn't even have time to understand what was happening. A wave of cold, muddy water hit her car with force, flooding the windshield and washing over her completely through the open window. "What the—" she began, but didn't have time to finish. The BMW stopped a few meters away from her and began to reverse. Lauren turned on the windshield wipers, trying to clear the glass, and at that moment she saw who was behind the wheel. Adam Pennington rolled down the window and leaned out. Kyla was sitting next to him, and they were both laughing like crazy. Lauren felt the blood rush to her face. They did this on purpose. They deliberately drove into the puddle when they saw her car. "Oh, I'm sorry," Pennington shouted with feigned regret. "I didn't see the puddle. I hope nothing's wrong." "Adam, look at her," Kayla giggled. "She looks like a wet chicken." Lauren was indeed drenched. Water had seeped into the car through the window, and the seat was soaked through. She looked terrible, like someone who had been dunked in a dirty puddle. "You did that on purpose," she said as she got out of the car. "On purpose?" Pennington feigned indignation. "What an accusation! It was an accident." "Come on, Adam," Kayla snorted. "Tell her the truth. We really wanted to cheer up the old hag. Maybe now she'll realize it's time to stay home and not show her face in public." They laughed even louder and drove away, leaving Lauren standing in the middle of the street in her wet clothes. Passers-by looked at her sympathetically, but no one dared to approach her. Lauren got back into her car and looked at herself in the mirror. The sight was terrible. Her makeup was smeared, her hair was stuck to her head, and her suit was ruined. There was no way she could go to the interview looking like this. She took out her phone and dialed the number for Elements Consulting. "Good afternoon," said the secretary. "How can I help you?" "This is Lauren Barrett. I have an interview scheduled for 10 o'clock, but there has been an accident. Would it be possible to reschedule the meeting?" "One moment, please," came the reply, followed by the sound of pages being turned. "Lauren Barrett. Yes, I see. When would you like to reschedule?" "This afternoon or tomorrow morning?" Lauren asked. "Unfortunately, that's not possible," the secretary replied coldly. "Mr. Hammond has cleared his schedule especially for you. If you can't make it at the appointed time, we'll have to consider other candidates." "But I got caught in the rain. My clothes are soaked," Lauren began to explain. "I'm very sorry, but rules are rules. Being late or not showing up is considered a lack of serious intent. Good day." The dial tone sounded like a death sentence. Lauren knew she had lost her last chance. She had no other job offers, and it was unlikely that any would come up anytime soon. She drove home in a daze. Jerome was in the garage fixing something when he heard the car pull up. He went out to greet his sister with a smile on his face, but it disappeared as soon as he saw her condition. "My God, what happened to you?" Lauren told him everything. About the puddle, about Pennington and Kyle, about the ruined interview. With every word, Jerome's face darkened. "Those bastards!" he hissed. "It wasn't enough for them to fire you. They had to humiliate you too." "I lost my job, Jerome," Lauren cried. "It was my last chance, and they took it away from me. What am I going to do now?" Jerome hugged his sister, feeling rage boiling inside him. He had seen how, month after month, those bastards had broken Lauren down, how they had enjoyed her suffering. "Go inside and get changed," he said hoarsely. "I'll finish up here." Lauren went into the house, and Jerome returned to the garage. He tried to focus on repairing the old bike, but his hands were shaking with rage. How could anyone be so cruel? How could anyone enjoy the suffering of others? An hour later, Lauren came out to him. She had changed into her house clothes, but her face was red from crying. "Jerome, I don't know what to do," she said quietly. "I don't have any strength left. They've won." "No," her brother replied firmly. "They haven't won. Don't give up. What else can I do? I'm 60 years old. No one wants to hire me. I have almost no money." Jerome put down his tools and walked over to his sister. "Listen to me, Lauren. You are the strongest person I know. You've been through the death of your parents, divorce, thousands of hardships, and you've always found the strength to keep going." "But back then there was hope," she whispered. "Now there is none." They stood in the garage among old things, tools, memories of the past. In the corner, Jerome's old shotgun, which he had inherited from his father, was gathering dust. Lauren looked over at it mechanically, and to her surprise thought, "What if I just scare them? What if I show those bastards that not everyone is willing to put up with their abuse?" The thought was wild, absurd, but it wouldn't leave her mind. Lauren imagined herself walking into the office with the gun, Pennington and Kayla's faces turning pale, begging for forgiveness for all the harm they had done. "I'm going to them," she said suddenly. "Where?" Jerome didn't understand. "To the office. I'll talk to them. I'll tell them what I think of their behavior." "Lauren, it's useless. It's useless to explain anything to people like that." "Then I'll scare them," she said, her voice hardening. "Let them understand that every person has a limit to their patience." Jerome looked at his sister intently. He saw something new in her eyes. Not submission or despair, but cold determination. "Lauren, what are you planning to do?" But she was already walking toward the corner of the garage where the old shotgun stood. The gun hadn't been fired in years. There were no bullets in it, but it looked quite menacing. "I'll just scare them," she repeated, picking up the shotgun. "Let them know what it feels like to be afraid." "Lauren, stop!" Jerome tried to stop her. "This is crazy." "Crazy?" She turned to her brother. "What they did to me isn't crazy. Firing a man 3 days before retirement, humiliating him, taking away his last chance at a normal life." Jerome could see that his sister was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. A month of humiliation and hopelessness had brought her to a point where logic no longer worked. "Lauren, think about the consequences." "I've been thinking about the consequences for 30 years, she interrupted. "I've always been good, always played by the rules. And what did I get?" She checked the shotgun. It was unloaded, just as she thought. Jerome tried to find the words to reason with his sister, but she was already walking toward the car. "I'll just scare them," she repeated. "I'll just show them that not everyone is willing to take abuse silently." Lauren got into the car and drove downtown. The drive took 20 minutes, and the whole time, fragments of memories flashed through her mind. The humiliation at the office, Kayla's mockery, Pennington's cold cruelty, today's incident with the puddle. The prime advisor's office was full of people. It was the middle of the workday, and employees were busy with their tasks. Lauren entered through the main entrance, holding the shotgun under her coat. The security guard on the first floor didn't even notice her. An elderly woman didn't arouse suspicion. In the elevator, she ran into several former colleagues. They greeted her curtly, not knowing what to say. Everyone knew the circumstances of her dismissal, but preferred not to dwell on the unpleasantness. On the 7th floor, Lauren got out of the elevator and headed for Pennington's office. The secretary wanted to stop her, but Lauren walked past, ignoring her protests. Pennington was sitting at his desk with Kayla standing next to him. They were discussing something, laughing, enjoying their power and impunity. "What are you doing here?" Pennington exclaimed when he saw Lauren. "You're not allowed in the office." Lauren took out the shotgun and pointed it at her boss. Kayla screamed and backed away toward the wall. "What are you doing?" she cried. "Help! She has a gun!" "Shut up," Lauren said coldly. "I'm the one talking now." Pennington turned pale but tried to remain calm. "Lauren, be reasonable. Put the gun down and we'll forget about this." "Forget?" she laughed. "How can I forget months of humiliation? How can I forget that you took everything from me, my job, my dignity, my future? We were just doing our job." "Your job?" Lauren raised her voice. "Your job is to mock people, to ruin their lives for your own pleasure?" Commotion broke out in the office. Employees heard the shouting and realized something serious was happening. "You thought you could do whatever you wanted to me," Lauren continued, "that I would silently endure your abuse. But every person has a limit." "Lauren, be reasonable." Pennington tried to calm her down. "Put down your weapon, and we'll discuss this civilly." "Civilly?" She laughed bitterly. "When you fired me 3 days before my retirement, was that civil? When you deliberately smeared me with dirt today, was that civil?" Kayla, standing against the wall, suddenly grabbed a cup of cold coffee from the table and threw the contents in Lauren's face. "Shut up, you old psycho!" she screamed. "I'm sick of your complaints." Cold coffee poured over Lauren's face and clothes. It was the last humiliation, the last straw that broke the camel's back. Something snapped in Lauren's head, and the world around her turned red. She pulled the trigger. The sound of the gunshot deafened everyone in the office. Pennington fell, clutching his chest. Lauren turned the barrel toward Kayla and fired again. The girl collapsed next to her boss. The office was completely silent. Lauren stood in the middle of the office with a smoking shotgun in her hands, looking at what she had done. Her mind gradually cleared, and the horror of what had happened began to sink in. A few minutes later, the police arrived at the building. Lauren did not resist arrest. She silently handed over her weapon and allowed herself to be handcuffed. "You have the right to remain silent," the officer recited the standard formula. "Anything you say can be used against you in court." Lauren didn't listen. She looked at the bodies of Pennington and Kayla and realized that her life was over. Months of humiliation had brought her to this moment, and now there was no turning back. The police led her out of the office under the curious glances of passers-by. Ahead of her lay prison, trial, and sentencing.